The United States has been seen as a world power for generations, with the world's largest economy, military, and dominance of the US dollar. This is undeniable. Indeed, their culture is very dominating as well. But some say it bullies other countries and gets involved in politics where they don't belong. For more on this now, I'm joined by a social and political commentator, Donovan E. Williams, who joins us virtually from here in Johannesburg. Donovan, thank you so much for your time. Now, this could be a very complex and vast conversation. In fact, it would make for quite a few history lessons, wouldn't it? Because that is how far this conversation should really stretch. But let's use what's in our current affairs right now, and what many have said is a very stark example of double standards. And you bring that out in the column, thought leadership column that you wrote that appeared in the Mail and Guardian website recently, pointing to how the US has approached Russia's attack on Ukraine and how it's very quickly censured Russia's President Vladimir Putin for their decision to move children or Ukrainian children from an area before they bombed it, and then compared that to their lack of censure towards Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, whose government has attacked Palestine and Gaza, and in which about thousands of innocent children have lost their lives. That is quite stark. But for those who have studied the geopolitics in which the US has been involved, it hasn't been a surprise, has it?
That's the sad part, isn't it, Marcel? That it isn't a surprise. And it's not geopolitics, it's actually geoeconomics. It's literally speaking about making money for the few in the United States and their friends. And that must concern us. We can easily get caught into, and right now, because what is going on in Gaza is reprehensible and it bothers us, and get located only into that. But the point that the article makes, or the point I make in the article, is it's simply put, it's not just the hypocrisy. The United States is a bully. It is a bully, and it doesn't apply any rules. It makes and creates the rules as it goes along, depending on what it wants. And we, unfortunately, South Africa and many other countries are pushed and cajoled into taking certain stances. And if they do not, they are threatened by even commentators within their own countries, that if they do not have the favor of the United States, they will run into trouble. I think if you would recall a few years ago, Marcel, that currently the president of CAF and one of the wealthiest persons on the African continent, Patrice Motsepe, when meeting with then President Trump, was then the president of the United States, he went out of his way to say, everybody in Africa loves you. Is it important that the president of the United States needs to feel like he or she is loved? And this is the problem, that if you are not bowing down and scraping yourselves to tell the United States how wonderful and beautiful they are, they deal with you like any bully does. And if you know a bully, today the bully takes your lunch, tomorrow the bully wants your lunch and your money and something else, and you never satisfy that bully. And I am saying clearly, the United States has been and will always continue to be a bully. And the world is unsafer. Since it's been at the head, at the apex of the world, it is unsafer. And it creates the conditions for wars so that it can sell its arms. But more important than that, it infects every multilateral body that is created for peace in one way or the other. It's not a member of the ICC, but it affects the ICC, and that's the International Criminal Court. It's not a member of the Kyoto Protocol, but it ensures that what it wants from the Kyoto Protocol in terms of nuclear non-proliferation, the non-proliferation treaty, it gets what it wants. It refuses to come to the World Summit on Racism or Sustainable Development, but it insists that whatever declaration it makes must be in line with them. It insists. It's the country that uses its veto the most in the Security Council of the United Nations. It makes the United Nations impotent. It makes it not an institution we can believe will act on our behalf, but only act when the United States is in agreement.
Well, let's talk about the United Nations for a second, because you're not the first to point out the fact that the United Nations is stationed right in New York tells you all you need to know, because there's been massive criticism of the organization about their lack of teeth, specifically as we've watched over 10,000 civilians lose their lives in Gaza in a matter of weeks. What do you make of what we've seen come out of the United Nations, other than just some strongly worded statements?
Precisely. Decisions of the United Nations that must be implemented are decisions of the Security Council. So when you pass any decision in the General Assembly, it is symbolic. It doesn't need to be implemented. It is just that which is in the United Nations Security Council. And as you know, there are 5 veto-wielding countries who have won, who are the countries who were the victors of World War II, which is China, Russia, Britain, France, and the United States. And it is the United States that uses their veto the most. So ipso facto, in this case, Israel basically has a veto. But it's not just the veto that's the problem, in my personal opinion, that is the problem in the United Nations. I think there should be a veto. It's the matter of permanence, that those countries, no matter what they do, will permanently be members of the Security Council with a veto. How can we say that 100 years from now, the United States or any other country must have a veto and must be permanent members? And that is what's rendering simply put, the United Nations without real power to intervene. We should have the United Nations moving into Israel and Palestine and putting in a peacekeeping force. But they can't do that. Let's give some other examples. The United Nations, they mandate certain countries to make peace in conflict regions. The country mandated for Israel and Palestine is the United States, and it's clearly not an honest broker or a neutral broker. And I'll give you another example. The United States was mandated by the United Nations for the DRC. South Africa, on its own, through SADC, and through the African Union, or the Organization of African Union, when it was officially called, through Madiba and Thabo Mbeki, and then thereafter others, have intervened in the DRC such that it did have democratic elections. And there are still problems. But without South Africa's intervention, you would have never had peace and democratic elections in the DRC, because you would have followed the United States. The United States does not know how to make peace. It only knows how to make war. And making war is profitable for the United States. It uses every structure, including the United Nations, unfortunately. And I will repeat this. It is a bully, and you bully a bully. If you don't bully a bully, it will bully you for the rest of your time, and you'll never satisfy it.
Donovan E. Williams, thank you so much for your time this evening. Donovan is a political and social commentator joining us virtually from Johannesburg. Thank you so much for that. And we'll have more